Parents, do you care about your children's and grandchildren's future? Do you care about the future of America?
Hello, my name is John Nestor. If you're concerned about the future of our country, stay with me. If not, tune me out. I've just completed a documentary entitled The Last of the Greatest Generation. It's about those of us Americans who survived the Great Depression and fought in World War II, and who came home and built the greatest economy the world has ever known. I'd like to read something to you. It's an interesting article. How long do we have? About the time of our original 13 states adopted their new constitution in 1787, Alexander Tytler, a Scottish history professor at the University of Edinburgh, had this to say about the fall of the Athenian Republic some 2,000 years earlier. A democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always vote for the candidate who promises the most benefits from the public treasury, with the results that every democracy will finally collapse due to loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations from beginning of history has been about 200 years. During those 200 years, those nations always progressed through the following sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back into bondage. Now, why should you believe anything said by me? You don't know anything about me or my character, but that can easily be remedied. Just go to the link in Reflections of a Weekend Painter, and you'll learn all about me. Well, almost all about me. I've known great poverty, and I've been amongst the rich and the famous, most who you recognize. I could spend the rest of my life traveling around the world, but I've traveled extensively. I could write another book. I could maybe paint. Might even make a couple of movies. But instead, I want to pick a fight. And I want you to pick a fight with me. I promise you this: you will never lose a penny. I also promise that as long as the United States exists, your name will last forever. Today, most Americans are either closing their eyes to a situation they do not wish to acknowledge, or they are unaware of how close we are to losing our Constitution and our freedom. If we follow the example of the ants and behave as they do, we Americans can move mountains. Nothing can stop us. There are three entities, possibly a fourth being developed, that vie for control of the world economy. One is the Mafia, which is more widely known because of Francis Coppola's The Godfather. The other two, and possibly three, are much more veiled. We can't blame Congress too much, because if you want to be a person in Congress, a senator or a member of the House, you need money to get elected, a lot of money to get elected. And when you take money from people, from these entities, you're obligated to those people.
Question: do we choose our destiny, or does destiny choose us?
Mafia. Joe Kennedy, Jack Kennedy, Bob Kennedy, Marilyn Monroe, Jimmy Hoffa, the IRS, the CIA. Howard Hughes had the most melancholy eyes I've ever looked into. They masked a lot of secrets, sadness, and pain. Howard Hughes. James Ingleton, CIA counterintelligence, had this to say about Howard Hughes at Howard Hughes' funeral. Howard Hughes, when it came to his country's interest, no one knew his target better. Howard Hughes, we were lucky to have him. Howard Hughes was a great patriot. Let's talk a little bit about money and taxes. Corporations and businesses do not pay taxes. Any tax imposed upon them is passed on to the consumer. Only wage earner and consumers pay taxes. The Supreme Court has ruled that tax avoidance is legal. It is the responsibility of every American citizen to pay the least amount of taxes as possible. Tax evasion is a criminal offense. When I got out of the service during World War II, I came to California to reunite with my family, my mother, my sister, and my brother. I got lucky one evening as I was invited to a party at Marion Davis's beach home. My cousin George was an executive in the American Guild of Variety Artists Union, and there I met a young lady by the name of Shy. I was looking for a job, and I asked if somehow or other he might be able to help me find work. Through his influence, I was employed by 20th Century Fox Studios. I became a go-for in the production department. Whatever the producers wanted me to do, I took care of it, like taking people on tours of the lot, introducing them to the motion picture business, taking them on a sound stage, introducing them to movie stars. There I was, in the midst of all this glamour and beautiful women. Alice Faye, Loretta Young, Betty Grable, Dana Andrews, John Payne. The producers thought enough of my good looks to give me acting lessons. And there I was at 20th Century Fox Studios taking acting lessons. Marilyn Monroe was on the lot at the time, and we became friends. One day, Marilyn and I were sitting at the commissary having a cup of coffee, and Marilyn was moving her lower jaw around. I said, "Marilyn, is there something wrong with your jaw?" She says, "Oh, no, Johnny. I'm just practicing a sexy move. I've got a screen test with Glenn Langdon in about a week. What do you think?" I says, "Yeah, Marilyn, that looks pretty sexy." Daryl Zanuck, head of the production department, did not like Marilyn Monroe. He wanted to fire her. However, some of the producers pointed out to him that Marilyn was getting more fan mail than her top-notch stars are on the lot. Daryl Zanuck said, "Okay, keep her, but get her to lose weight. She's too fat." I went to see Marilyn perform at the screen test with Glenn Langdon. She had lost weight. She came onto the set, and she looked great. She was dressed in a black evening gown, and the wardrobe department must have sewn it on her. It was so tight-fitting. The screen test was successful. John Nicolescu directed Marilyn in How to Marry a Millionaire. Many consider that picture to be Marilyn's best. John Nicolescu said, "Those of us that were filming Marilyn didn't realize what was happening until we saw the rushes the next day. When we looked at the rushes, we saw the magic that was Marilyn Monroe." It seems that somehow or other, Marilyn Monroe was in love with the cameras, and the cameras responded. Here's something that's remarkable about Marilyn Monroe in show business. When the studio announced that there was going to be a Marilyn Monroe film, the worldwide distributors bid on her film before it ever went to camera. Not even John Wayne accomplished that. The Marilyn Monroe that I knew was a very nice, gentle person. James Barham Secretary-Treasurer of a Teamster local in San Diego, California, asked me to create a concept for organizing doctors under the Teamster banner. After I completed the chore, James Barham called Jimmy Hoffa and said, "Jimmy, you're not going to believe what John Nestor has done with this concept of organizing doctors for the Teamsters." I met with Jimmy Hoffa in Palm Beach, Florida. I said to Jimmy, we're going to charge the doctors $20,000 initiation fee to belong to the union. He said, "John, are you out of your mind?" I said, "Hear me out, Jim. You know, these doctors at the end of each year are scrambling around trying to find a tax deduction. That $20,000 is a tax deduction, and we're not going to ask them for the $20,000 up front. We're going to lend it to them out of one of our trusts at a nice interest rate. And they can repay that $20,000 when they retire. And no doctor under the Teamster banner will ever have to pay for malpractice insurance again. We're going to select doctors that do not have drug problems or alcohol problems or any other problem for that matter." Jimmy Hoffa put together 100 Teamsters, and they were coached on feigning appendicitis. These men went to the doctors, were examined, and 33 out of 100 doctors were prepared to do unnecessary surgery. "Jimmy, we are going to train a team of attorneys that will specialize in defending malpractice suits. We may even countersue any frivolous lawsuit that is brought against any of our Teamster doctors." Jimmy Hoffa got very excited and said, "John, when I get my union back, we're going to do that." He began to tell me about a secret grand jury, and I said, "Jimmy, stop. I don't want to hear about that. You're only going to put me in harm's way." A few weeks later, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. Sometime later, I had occasion to be at the La Costa Country Club. La Costa Country Club was funded by the Teamster Union, and I was there with a gentleman by the name of Eddie Rio. Eddie Rio was a confidant of Bob Hope, and they used to tour vaudeville together. I was instrumental in getting Eddie Rio the presidency of the American Guild of Variety Artists. We were sitting at this table with a bunch of the mob guys that came in from different parts of the country. Eddie asked about what happened to Jimmy. The gentleman looked up at me and looked up at Eddie, and he pointed a finger towards me. And Eddie said, "Don't worry about it, he's okay." The story I got from that man was that Jimmy Hoffa was murdered in conjunction of the mob and the CIA's assistance. He was then, after 3 days of torture, killed, shredded up in a chopper, and became a part of the Pontiac Freeway. Is it true? Your guess is as good as mine. Jimmy Hoffa lived by 3 rules. 1, never back down from a fight. 2, do what you have to do when reason and fairness fails. 3, never kill the goose that lays the golden egg. Jimmy Hoffa had more to do of bringing the working man into the middle class than anybody else in his country, in my opinion. I think you would have liked the man. When I was in my late 30s, I was an advertising executive for the 3rd largest chain of newspapers in the country at that time. I had an appointment at a new car agency to meet a new general sales manager. I'll never forget what I said when I walked into his office. I couldn't believe it. I looked at this man and I said, "What the hell are you doing here?" He was about 40. He looked up at me and smiled, and he said, "Are you one of the boys?" And I said, "No." I says, "But I was raised with the boys, and I know one when I see one." He started to laugh. About a year later, he had his own new car agency. I went to see him because I wanted to buy a new car for my mother for a Mother's Day present. We chatted briefly, and he threw over an envelope to me. It was pretty thick. I looked inside, and in there were $100 bills. And I said, "Howard, is this for me?" And he laughed, and I tossed the envelope back to him. Shortly after that, a gentleman entered his office. Howard invited him in to sit down, and he tossed the envelope to this gentleman. This gentleman looked into the envelope, opened up his briefcase, put the envelope in his briefcase. And Howard said, I misplaced your business card. Can you give me another business card? And give one to John, too." I looked at this man's business card, and he was a high-ranking IRS official. After the man left, Howard laughed, and he liked to brag. And he said, "You know what? That 10 grand that was in that envelope isn't mine. I get the guys who are writing my credit life insurance to pay me $10,000 a year in cash, and then I turn it over to that jerk, and I save about $125,000 in taxes." Howard became very wealthy. He got into the drug business. His best friend fronted for him. When the drug agency got close to Howard's operation, the only one that could finger Howard was his best friend. His best friend had to die. The last time I saw Howard was when he was being chauffeured in a bulletproof limousine, smoking a $50 cigar. Welcome to the real world. At the time I was president of Prepaid Legal Plans of America, I had 2 FBI agents visit me at my home, and they suggested that we talk privately. And I said, "No, anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my family." They asked me to become an undercover agent for them. It had to do with the Teamster Union and other unions. They knew I had access to these unions on a high level, and they wanted me to spy for them. I declined. 3 days later, I was arrested on 3 counts of security violation. As president of Prepaid Legal Plans, we had solicited some people that would care to invest in this new entity. They would lend $10,000 to the company, and they would receive shares of stock. The shares of stock was $150. I did not solicit these funds from a person that had filed suit against Prepaid Legal Plans of America. That was just a part of the lawsuit, because the husband of one of the principals of Prepaid Legal Plans of America, the vice president, had done a very poor job in investing this person's money. He had lost in excess of a couple $100,000. In any event, my attorney thought that it was impossible for me to lose this case. Our corporate attorney had filed the necessary papers with the Department of Corporations and the stock transfers. It was very open. However, I was convicted. I was given 3 months incarceration and 3 years probation. While I was in prison, I had a young Negro man sit next to me, good-looking fellow, while we were having a bite to eat. He had just come into this felony tank. And he said to me, "I understand you're connected." And I says, "Really? What makes you think so?" He says, "Well, word gets around." He says, "Look, If you can do something for me, I'd appreciate it. And I said, well, what is that? He says, I would like to become a hitman for the mob. I said, really? What are your qualifications? He said, well, I'm this Green Beret. I know something about killing. Well, why do you want to become a hitman for the mob? He says, look, he says, I'm a Negro. I have two small children. It's pretty hard for me to have a good life. And I want the good life for my children and my wife. And I said to him, look, I'm not what you think I am. But as long as I'm going to be stuck here for the next 90 days, how about I teach you how to legitimately raise money? So you can go back to your neighborhood, raise the money, start some businesses, and give the people in your neighborhood a job. This Negro disappeared. I learned a lot about incarceration while I spent that 90 days there.
Permit me to share a few thoughts with you. One, I'd like to introduce you to a new word. The new word is Gaffic, spelled G-A-F-I-C-H-H silent. Definition: 6 of humankind's most negative traits. G for greed, A for apathy, F for fear, I for ignorance, C for corruption, H for hatred. Politics without a conscience creates wars. Wars make a great deal of money for these entities. For thousands of years, not much has changed. We the people have two possessions that are also very powerful. One is that there's a lot more of us than there are of those, some 2,000 people, that control these entities. Secondly, we have the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust. That's an entity of our own that can be more powerful than those entities of which I speak. Think about it. Try to put aside political parties. You may want to, just for your own edification, to see who have wasted the most money, whether it was the Democrats or the Republicans. Our Constitution and our country will survive if we deserve it. It's up to us, not the politicians that we elect. Let's put them in their proper place. Those that we elect to Congress, to the presidency, are servants to our Constitution and our country. If they don't behave well, we have the instrument to throw them out.
We could do it. It's easy. I hope you take this glass jar, plastic jar, and I hope every day you put in 28 cents, just as a reminder of how precious our country and our Constitution is. In a way, it's recognizing all of those who came before us, who fought and died for us, and all those young men and women we sent off to war. If we accomplish this, we might even be able to never have a war again. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust is dedicated to an open and honest federal government and preserving the United States Constitution. Let us use our common sense and ask the right questions. Who has the power overnight to cut your CD savings from earning 7.5% to 1%, thereby robbing most senior citizens of their retirement income, and why? Who has the power to allow banks to leverage your savings and checking accounts at 50 to 1? That is your money at high risk, not the bank's money. Who has the power to bail out the banks and Wall Street, General Motors, Chrysler, and why? Who has the power to drain our U.S. Treasury and burden generations of Americans with trillions of dollars of debt, and why? What do you do with a Congress that lives by the unwritten rule? You go along if you want to get along, which means you help me get money from the Treasury to take home to my state so I can get reelected, and I'll do the same for you. Who is the power over the presidency, Congress, the Supreme Court, Department of Justice, the IRS? All fair questions. Framers of our Constitution were smart. They realized that they were about to turn a great deal of power into the hands of just a few men. That's why we have freedom of the press in the First Amendment of our Constitution. The press was meant to expose the greed and self-serving of the men in power. Today's press and the news media are a part of the same hypocrisy. They are pretty much show business, and they want their profits. The answer to saving our United States and our Constitution is in the character of our everyday, hard-working citizens. Will you join with me and buy a $100 30-year Treasury bond and assign the interest to the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust, and save 28 cents a day for 364 days and buy your second $100 30-year Treasury bond and assign the interest earned to our, we the people, Fourth Estate Constitution Trust. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust is all that is needed to preserve our freedom and Constitution for all future generations of Americans. Our $100 30-year Treasury bonds are held in trust and can never be spent. Our $100 30-year Treasury bonds earn interest, funding our Fourth Estate Constitution Trust. It's power against power, and we can win. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust can save our Constitution for all those Americans who will come after we are gone. We owe it to those Americans who came before us, who fought and died for us. We the people can do it. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will employ the finest legal talent, the finest financial talent, the finest political talent, the finest judicial talent, the finest investigative talent to determine the value of each bill presented to Congress and report its findings to the citizens of the United States. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will review the performance of each member of Congress quarterly, without prejudice or passion. Review on the internet for thect.org. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will review the Department of Justice quarterly, without prejudice or passion. Review on the internet for thect.org. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will review the Presidency quarterly, without prejudice or passion. Review on the internet for thect.org. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will review the IRS quarterly, without prejudice or passion. Review on the internet for thect.org. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust is non-political and prohibited to support any political party or person seeking public office, federal, state, or local. Questions and answers. Question: what is J.J. Nestor's salary? Answer: none beyond travel and lodging expenses. Question: who will select the board of directors? Answer: You will select from a list of prominent persons submitted by you. Question: how many directors will serve the board? Answer: 5, for a term of 3 years at no salary beyond travel and lodging expenses. Question: will there be a supervisor of personnel? Answer: yes, chosen by the board of directors. Question: who will select outside legal counsel? Answer: the board of directors. Question: who will select an outside accounting firm? Answer: the board of directors. Note: all expenditures will be open to the public scrutiny via the internet at 4thect.org. Question: what position will J.J. Nestor fill for the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust? Answer: passive observer. Question: what do I, John J. Nestor, hope to gain for my effort to create the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust? Answer: it is not money or recognition. I want to know if 10 million of my fellow patriots will join me and pick a fight to save our Constitution and our freedom. 28 cents a day is so little, is it not? Imagine the great benefit to our country if every adult American citizen saved 28 cents a day for 364 days every year and supported our U.S. Treasury by buying a $100 30-year Treasury bond to be donated to the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust. Remember, our donations can never be spent. Question: what is John J. Nestor's initial choice for the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust Board of Directors? Answer: Charles Krauthammer, Melinda Gates, Steven Spielberg, Dr. Benjamin Carson, Michael Ilyich. First alternate: Judge Andrew Napolitano. Second alternate: John J. Nestor. Let us choose our common sense. A republic is not a charity. 3,000 years of history proves it. A republic is big business, dependent on solid profits. You can't have 50% of the people, many illegal, living off the public treasury, along with self-serving politicals. Charity must come from people of kind hearts, charitable trusts with no tax deductions, not from the treasury. Money in itself should be a measured reward for productivity, ingenuity, and progress. What is the earning power of 28 cents on a 30-year U.S. Treasury bond? Answer: none, because you can't buy a 30-year U.S. Treasury bond for 28 cents. What is the power of one citizen's vote? None, because one vote alone has no voice. What is the earning power of 10 million $100 U.S. Treasury bonds at 4.5% annually? Answer: $45 million, used to retain the finest talent to monitor our federal government. What is the power of 10 million everyday working citizens' vote? Along with the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust, it is great enough to guarantee our freedom and an honest, efficient federal government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and maybe no more wars and a 10% federal income tax. I'm picking a fight, and I want 10 million Americans to join with me to save our Constitution and our federal treasury. With a little trust in each other, we can do it. All it takes is 10 million of us patriots to make a charitable donation of $100 to buy 10 million 30-year Treasury bonds held in trust by our Fourth Estate Constitution Trust. Our donations are tax deductible, and we will never lose a penny. We patriots can win and make our treasury solvent, and it is our treasury. To fund the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust have your bank electronically transfer $100 to the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust account. Electronic transfers only. No cash or checks. Electronic transfers are safe and simple. Electronic address posted on our 4thect.org website. The Fourth Estate Constitution Trust is restricted to the direct purchase of United States $100 30-year U.S. Treasury bonds and automatically renewed in perpetuity. The $100 30-year U.S. Treasury bonds earned interest is automatically deposited in the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust General Account. Your name will be entered on the Patriot Scroll of Honor in perpetuity. Depository, Bank of America. Due to the misbehavior of the IRS targeting applicants filing for a 501c3 or 501c4 nonprofit status, the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust will create a secure trust account to protect your $100 donation. When the IRS approves our 501c3 nonprofit status, you will be notified via our Fourth Estate Constitution Trust website, www.4thect.org. At that time, you may qualify for a tax deduction. Please be advised, the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust's goal is a $100 donation from 10 million U.S. registered voters once a year for 2 years. That is only 28 cents a day for 730 days. Our 10 million voices and our $2 billion can preserve our Constitution and freedom. And remember, no one can touch our $2 billion. Do we choose our destiny, or does destiny choose us? Our first president, General George Washington, in his January 21st, 1796 farewell address to Congress and the citizens of our fledgling nation, solemnly cautioned Congress and the citizens of the United States. It is the direct, solemn duty and responsibility of the people to guard against tyranny from the government. Thomas Jefferson, second President of the United States. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of currency, the banks and corporations will grow around them and will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. Paper money is not property. It is only the ghost of money, and it is not money in itself. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 34th President of the United States. An executive order issued by the President of the United States gives dictatorial power over the people without checks and balances, dangerous to the people and our Constitution. 28th President Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1918. Quote, "There exists a power somewhere so powerful, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when, then, in condemnation of it." President Wilson signed into law the formation of the Federal Reserve Board, which he later bitterly regretted. Who are the Masons? Masons are men of good character who strive to improve themselves and make the world a better place. Masons belong to the oldest fraternity known to man. Masonry teaches that each person, via self-improvement and helping others, has an obligation to make a difference for good in the world.
George Washington, Henry Ford, James Monroe, General Marshall, Ben Franklin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Will Rogers, John Wayne, Al Jolson, Ty Cobb, John Glenn, Rudyard Kipling, J.C. Penney, Norm Cosby, General MacArthur, Charles A. Lindbergh, Clark Gable are just a few of the many famous Freemasons worldwide, including Alexander the Great. Freemasons are men of faith. When the citizens of a republic fears its government and remains silent when it should protest, makes cowards of us all. During the past 4 months, I have asked friends, Tea Party persons, veterans organizations, and church members to sit on the Fourth Estate Constitution Trust Interim Board of Directors for the single purpose of opening a depository trust account at the Bank of America for a direct electronic transfer deposit address. The $100 deposits are restricted to the purchase of $100 30-year Treasury bonds to be renewed in perpetuity, which means no one can touch our $2 billion. I felt honor-bound to advise interim board members are likely to be investigated by the FBI and the IRS. I invite 2 persons to protest with me as interim board members. Contact me, 949-394-6333. Email jonjn@gmail.com. We the people can do it. We have the vote. We have 28 cents a day. We have our Constitution.